Leslie Ann, hi. You're muted, so we can't hear you.
Hang on. Okay, is everybody unmuted?
I think so. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
great.
yes. Sorry about that. So I'll start all over again. Welcome everyone to the 19th edition of the Female Eye Film Festival and the Meet the Decision Makers panel discussion. I want to thank our supporter, our sponsor, Ontario Creates, who support all the industry initiatives, the panels, the filmmaker panel discussions, the directors roundtable, and all of the industry initiatives that we are unpacking virtually this year on StreamYard and feeding to our YouTube channel, 19th Female Eye Film Festival on YouTube. I want to introduce our moderator, Carol Whiteman, longtime partner of the Female Eye Film Festival, and I am an alumni of Women in the Director's Chair, I think back in 2007. So we go back a long way, don't we, Carol? Dr. Carol Whiteman is the co-creator and producer of Women in the Director's Chair, executive producer of the WIDC Feature Film Award. We have Anna Nuala, Ontario Creates. Anna is the program consultant, film and TV, industry initiatives at Ontario Creates. And we have Aisha Hassan, lead inclusion initiatives and content analyst for Telefilm Canada. So Dr. Carol Whiteman, I'm going to hand the panel over to you.
Thank you, Leslie Ann. It's great to be here. I'm really grateful for the collaboration between the Female Eye Film Festival and Women in the Director's Chair. It's a long-standing collaboration, so thank you for that. And I want to acknowledge that I am based here in Vancouver, British Columbia, which is the unceded and traditional lands of the Coast Salish people, the Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Musqueam. So I'm grateful to be a settler on these lands. And I am really looking forward to this in-depth conversation with our guests today from Telefilm Canada and from Ontario Creates, two kind of linchpin decision makers in our film industry landscape. And I invite Anna and Aisha to share with us some of their background, what they love about what they do, what their organizations offer to our industry, how we can communicate with them and interact with them, and what we see kind of laying ahead of us in the landscape and how things have changed. But first of all, I want to invite those who are tuned in right now to share with us in the chat your title. Are you a writer, director, producer, actor? What is your role in the industry, and where are you located? Are you in Ontario? Are you in some other part of Canada? Are you in another country? And we kind of want to feed that knowledge into our conversation, because our organizations that we work with here, Telefilm Canada and Ontario Creates, have different ways of interacting with our industry, and we're going to unpack that, as Leslie Ann said. So Leslie Ann, I think, is going to be helping us with monitoring the chat, and Leslie Ann's wonderful interns and supporters at the Female Eye Film Festival will hopefully give us some information through our chat, through StreamYard, and we will be able to kind of figure out who's in the audience. And please send your questions into the chat. We will tackle them closer to the end of the conversation, which will be about 90 minutes long altogether. And we will, I think, let's go from here. Let's see what's something just popped up from StreamYard, but it went away. So we'll capture that in a moment. But first of all, I'd love to invite Aisha from Telefilm Canada to tell us a little bit about what you love about your job and how did you come to it, Aisha? Yes.
Hi, everyone. Okay. Just wanted to make sure I was unmuted. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me here, Carol. And happy to discuss a bit of my background here at Telefilm. I started at Telefilm most recently in 2020, but I have worked on the CMFPA side previously before that. So I started in 2020 in November, and as many will know, Telefilm went through a very a challenging year with a lot of questions asked about from the industry about, you know, some of how the funding is distributed, how the programs are run, how the decision making really happens. So I really came in to the team. My role is connected to the Equity and Representation Action Plan, and so that's the inclusion initiative side of my role. And then on the other side of my role is the content analyst side, which is connected to project financing. So which is making sure that I'm supporting filmmakers and content creators through analyzing their creative materials and application, engaging with external stakeholders and industry members to continue some of this dialogue that we started last year, especially on issues of equity and representation initiatives that are happening. And so keeping that conversation going, keeping that door open to collaboration, and really working directly with executive team members on strategy and policy that's looking to increase funding equity for creative teams from underrepresented communities, and really adding a lens of looking at all of our programs through the lens of equity and inclusion, and ensuring that they are consistent, there's equity across, they're transparent, and that we're able to deliver them in a timely way. And so prior to Telefilm, I have a lot of experience in the industry generally at I came up through working at TIFF, at Telefilm, as I mentioned before, at Chorus, at Directors Guild. Prior to that, I was also writing and also working as a sensitivity reader. So that's sort of my experience in terms of knowing content and really knowing the type of people that are out there. And so one of the most exciting parts of my role is really doing outreach like this and getting to meet people who are have always sort of heard about Telefilm and not necessarily known exactly what Telefilm can do for them, or where in their career they would be a good fit for them to approach Telefilm. Who do they approach? What are the programs offered? How do you become eligible? So those are the types of questions I've been answering since I've joined the team about 5 months ago. And really, it's just that's the best part of it, I think, because I came to the team with a knowledge and understanding of the wonderful industry that's out there, of all the wonderful creators. And I've been able to bring a lot of that in here and to really help support some of the initiatives that are looking to modernize Telefilm.
Fantastic. Wow, so much to unpack with what's happening with Telefilm, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. Anna, can you tell us a little bit about what path you took to be in your role right now? You're new in this role as well.
Yeah, I was going to say 5 months as well. But I've actually been with Ontario Creates for 20 years now. In 2 weeks' time, I'll be celebrating 20 years. I've spent most of that time on the tax credit side. And the great thing about Ontario Creates is, well, we're an agency of the provincial government, and we support the creative industries, a number of sectors: book publishing, music, magazines, digital media, and of course film and TV. And what they like to do is they like to hire within the industries that they are supporting. So I have I was a producer before I started working for Ontario Creates, and then I continued to produce some films while working at Ontario Creates as well. That's another perk there. That's actually one of my films that I produced back there. And so it's been, this really long road to get here. And it started off as a 6-month contract. 20 years later, still here. And I'd have to say I'm absolutely loving the industry initiative side of the agency. And sometimes we're involved with the project from development all the way through to production. It doesn't happen often, just because we give you development money doesn't necessarily mean we get production funds. But the thing that I love about this role too is, we begin to see, rough cuts of the films, and you begin to see it, and you can look back and say, what started off as a little idea in someone's head is now this. It's like they've given birth to this project, and it has taken so many years and so many people to put that together. And you kind of say, it's like, and I was one of those people that manage to help, to help the creative get to where they want to be.
That's really fulfilling, isn't it? It's a
Yeah.
great perk of working in the positions that each of you have, that interaction with the actual creator, the stimulation of helping to see a project come to fruition, and elevating and amplifying the voices behind
Mhm.
those projects. I'm going to switch over to you, Aisha. Could you tell us about the overall structure of telefilm? I'm just anticipating that our audience is a wide range of emerging, mid-career, and maybe some established filmmakers, but that not everyone is quite familiar with all of the changes that have been happening within telefilm this past 12 months, and indeed in the last 6 months, a lot of is unfolding right before our eyes.
Yeah, happy to discuss a bit. So Telefilm has a number of programs that deliver funding to the industry. Our most sort of well-known ones would be the Development and Production Program. And so recently we just went through a significant number of changes of consultations over the past year, which have resulted in us implementing some of those changes into the programs themselves. So I'll speak about the production program specifically because that's a deadline that just closed for the English language side yesterday. And so, for example, for the production program is a program that we offer that allows feature film funding for feature films. And so this is the main changes for this stream that you'll see were about really making sure that we were looking at it from an inclusive perspective. We were making sure that we were being consistent with our decision making across the country. And so just to describe the program briefly, there are two basically funding thresholds in the production stream. So there's under 2.5 million budget stream, and there's an over 2.5 million or over. And so one of the changes that we made is pushing all the decision making for these two streams to a model that goes to advisory committees. And so this is a huge change from last time. This is if for those who know and are familiar with telefilm, this is something that we have on the Indigenous side, where you have a selection committee that helps advise on the projects. And so we took that model and have applied it to the mainstream in response to some of the feedback that we received and some of the consultations that we had with the industry, just to make sure there's consistency across. And so now we have made our evaluation criteria more transparent as well, but that being one of the main goals is to ensure that our guidelines, our essential information guide and our evaluation grid all live in a simple place on the website and are available for anybody that's looking to learn about funding. It helps answer questions like, how will I be evaluated? Is my project the right project for telefilm support? Is this going to fit? And so instead of having sort of projects fit our guidelines, we've sort of shared exactly the type of work that we're looking to promote. So you'll see when you go on the main production page, you'll see guiding principles there right on the main page. So you'll see the purpose of the program, the types of films we're looking to support, the industry support that we're looking to create, and where the filmmakers that whose voices we're trying to support as well. And beyond that, you'll see those changes within the guidelines too. As I described, the two funding requirements are different between the two funding thresholds. And another change that we've had this year is sort of removing that distributor requirement. This used to be a requirement that we had if you were applying with a project that was above 2.5 million, you would be required to have a distributor attached. We've removed that requirement this year, and that comes in at a 3.5 million threshold for the English language market. And the reason for that is to not force applicants or not force creators to feel like they have to go and find a distributor or enter into a deal that may not be suitable for their project or may not be suitable for this team specifically. And so we've heard some of that feedback, and we've removed that requirement. So that's another change that you'll see this year. For the higher budget side, the over 2.5 million side, we've also added a deadline this year, which is a new change, which we're hearing some feedback about as well. And whenever you have a change like this, it has to be grounded in the requirements of the program. So the reason that we made this change is so that we are able to prepare all of the applications and all of the projects that are submitted to us. We're able to prepare those and share those with our advisory committee. And so for that, we need to have a finite sort of deadline where we have all those items come in and they can go to the committee, and so that they can begin their evaluation. And so those are some of the brief changes that we've seen from the consultations. In many aspects, the consultations are not complete, so we're still getting feedback and we're still looking to publish those results. But at the same time, we're also responding to the industry need to have funding ready and programs ready to go, so that projects that were on hold from last year, for example, due to COVID, are able to apply. I hope I answered your question.
Wow, there's a lot. There is a lot of change and a lot of consultation happening at Telefilm. I just sort of want to back up just a moment here, because I'm imagining your website, and I don't know if we have the ability to go to the website homepage, but if we do, we'll allow the team in the backstage to take us there. If not, we can just sort of allow our guests to go to the website as they wish, and maybe we can describe a little bit. But there's financing is a huge part of what Telefilm offers for domestic or Canadian filmmakers, producers. So we enter through Telefilm through the producer. Is that at all stages, Aisha?
So how it works when you apply to Telefilm is you would be creating an applicant profile, and an applicant, so an organization is who is considered an applicant for Telefilm. It's not an individual person. So you would need to be incorporated and have your company be in Canada and be a sort of a Canadian corporation for you to be able to create that profile in our online system that's called Dialogue. And so you would create that profile, and through that applicant profile is what you would use to apply for any sort of funding. And within the feature film family, we have a development and production program that I just described briefly. We have something called Talent to Watch, which is our sort of talent development program. So that's a little bit earlier in the stage, or for more emerging filmmakers with strong voices who are looking to have going from like their shorts to features, or going from a lower budget short to the next step. So that's a great talent development program that we have. Development, which I described as well, and theatrical documentary, which is geared towards documentary films that are geared towards the theatrical market. And in addition to that, we also have distribution and marketing programs. So national marketing programs that are meant to support the films after, and to be able to market them here and abroad, and supporting participation in international festivals as well. We offer that as part of the distribution and marketing support within. So lots of programs within the feature film family.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also want to add another layer, because I know that some of our audience members work with film festivals across the country, and the Female Eye Film Festival is one of them, and other partner festivals that we work with. That the Telefilm also has a promotions program that supports festivals and initiatives like Women in the Director's Chair. Women in the Director's Chair has been supported by Telefilm Canada since the beginning of our initiative 25 years ago. So there's a lot of landscape that Telefilm actually supports in our industry.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So Anna, over to you. Let's switch gears and focus in on Ontario here with Ontario Creates. And could you tell us a little bit about the structure and how we work with Ontario Creates? It's quite a comprehensive organization, and I it's a challenge to unpack it in a short time. We could do a dissertation on it right now.
Well, like I said, we're an agency of the provincial government, and the mandate is that we act as a catalyst of economic development within the cultural industries that I had mentioned earlier on. But film and TV is obviously a very big part of that. The organization has so many programs, so many different services that we offer that a lot of people actually don't know about. So right now I'm on the funding side, and in addition to the production, the feature film production, we also have development. In terms of festivals and industry events, we do have the IDP fund, which is for capacity building and business development. We have a digital fund as well, the IDM, and what's some of the audience may actually be interested in looking into the IDM. There are two streams. One is nonlinear, which is the gaming for the gaming companies, and then the other one is linear content. So we would be looking at web series for that. So I do suggest that people take a look at the IDM for that. The reason I bring that up too is because on the feature film side, we have minimum budget thresholds and we have certain requirements that not everyone may be able to meet. And so there's something else that might help them. And we also have a film commission. The film commission, it's a great resource right now if you are shooting during COVID. We have all of the safety guidelines, anything that you possibly need to know is available on our website. It's also a great resource when COVID is over, and anything that you need to know about shooting here, everything is at your fingertips. We have a great locations library that is available online. If you need to shoot at a school, you put in school location, and then they'll show you all the ones that are available to you. So this is a program that everyone uses. It's a fantastic program. So that's the Film Commission. And the other thing that we do is, of course, tax credits, which ends up being a huge part of everyone's financing plan. And that is very important that people understand the rules connected to the tax credit. We are pretty much streamlined with CAVCO. There's a federal tax credit too, in case people didn't know about that either. So this is free money that is coming at you, paid for by provincial governments and by federal government. So I highly recommend that people take a look at our website and just see what kind of service we have that you can use.
Mm-hmm. Wow, it's fantastic. And I see that the festival has put up both of the websites where we can go and find your services and programs. And I'd just like to jump over to back to Aisha and talk a little bit more about those changes. And also, Aisha, if and I see a question coming up here, and I'll get to it in a second. Let's see. My goal is to make sure there's as much diversity behind the camera as there is in front of the camera. I've done this in all my films up to now, and aim to do so for all my future films as well. Says Panta Mosley, who is a filmmaker based in BC. And it leads me right into my question to you, Aisha, in terms of your role as the lead inclusion initiatives and content analyst. Can you talk a little bit about Telefilm's mission and its mandate, and how equity, diversity, and inclusion is forming its path forward for Telefilm?
For sure. I definitely want to share that equity and inclusion is a huge priority for Telefilm. Part of my hiring and my counterpart hiring in the French market in November was based on the Equity and Representation Action Plan that Telefilm established last year in 2020. And so one of the goals of that was to ensure that within key decision-making roles, there is you have staff members that come from different communities, as well as their portfolios encompass equity and inclusion within their areas of work. So for me, as a member of the project financing team and as a content analyst, I'm bringing that perspective to the projects that I'm looking at, as well as contributing to the larger conversation happening internally, speaking directly to our executive team to discuss some of the challenges that we're facing. As you know, when you start to approach a challenge like addressing inequity within your organization or within the programs or perceptions of it, there are other hurdles that come up. So one of the challenges that we're going into in our second year of this is how do we ensure that we are able to collect data, and how do we ensure that we're able to capture information that will inform us about the people accessing our funds, the people having needs, the people who are unable to access or have feedback about how things are administered. How are we able to channel that? How are we able to record it and accurately store it and access it? As a Crown Corporation as well, there's a lot of sort of legal ramifications around that. So we're learning those lessons this year. We're making sure that we're making sure that our infrastructure is set up to be able to handle the next steps that come forward in this. Within the funding programs, we launched, Telefilm launched before I joined, the racialized person stream within the development stream. And so that is a separate pool of money that's dedicated for Black, Indigenous people of color, for racialized Canadians who are looking to apply for development directly. And so that's a stream that we've gotten going last year, and it's been added as a permanent stream, part of the development program going forward. And so we're still, as I mentioned, we're still collecting consultation results. We're still trying to absorb all the feedback that we're getting and sort of find ways of including it into our programs and including it into our mandate. Exactly. So that part's still being worked out. So we're still, there's some parts that we're able to go right, I want to say go to camera, even though that's not what we're doing. And we want to be able to go right to them as much as, so there's definitely will there. There are, of course, challenges that limitations that we have as a Crown Corporation that we're looking to address internally and make sure that we are working toward equity and inclusion in sort of every aspect of what Telefilm is doing. And the best part of that is being open and able to be here to listen to the industry and have that feedback come in through our festival partners, through our other organizations that work with us, through our producers. So that is a conversation that's ongoing. And so we are looking to implement that in every sort of aspect. I don't know if that answers your question exactly, but that's definitely there. Part of the advisory committee model that we moved to for decision making is also looking to address some of that, is to be able to say that moving away from just a single decision maker model to a model that is with a group of people that are experts, internal and external, and are able to give great meaningful feedback that we need to make our decisions.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And Anna, what is an Ontario Creates doing in the equity, diversity, and inclusion element of your work?
Well, we acknowledge that there are many communities that face systematic barriers that prevent them from meaningfully participating within the industry. We do have a diversity stream that has, I think, entered into its 4th year now. And what it allows you to do is we actually have these decision criteria grids, which are posted on our guidelines. And so there's one stream, and then if you apply for the diversity stream, we're still looking at the exact same things, but we weight things differently. So the main difference is, like I said, we are very economic based. We're looking to see how much money are you spending in Ontario, how many Ontario residents are you going to employ, and for how long. So these are, important aspects of our decision making process. In the one stream, that question actually has a weighting of 40%, which with some of the diverse funds, they don't have access to all the same funding that others do, and so we recognize that. And instead of it being 40% under the diversity stream, it is now worth 25%. And then we take that the additional percentages, and then we put it more towards the creative and more towards the team. So we have had that now for a number of years. We also have a different minimum budget threshold. It's $1 million, but if you come under the diversity stream, it's $750 for a drama or an animation. The regular stream for documentaries is $600,000 minimum budget. For under the diversity, it's $500,000. So we do certain certain changes with that. The one thing though that we have done, the one change that we have done the past year, it's new for this year, is now what we're doing is we're applying this lens of diversity and inclusivity and equity across all applicants, across all of our funds. So whether you've indicated to us that you want to apply for the diversity stream or not, we are looking at, we're going to apply that lens to all the applications, and we also direct our jury to do the same thing now. So that is the new thing in terms of diversity.
And if I can
add
a bit there, just going off Anna's point there, part of the challenge that we identified, that Telefilm identified this in the last year, was the lack of data that we had on collecting on how folks identify, how they're able to bring their full selves when they're applying to us. So part of the work that we're doing is internally this year is just to be able to capture that information so that we can address any gaps, so that we can say, look, we are middling in this area, or we're losing track in this area, or there aren't enough women applying in this sort of capacity, or we're seeing a lot of screenwriters and creative personnel that are women but not directors or producers. So we are looking so the goal of last year was to make sure that we were set up in a way to be able to collect that data so that we can make data informed and evidence-based sort of decisions after that will change the programs or will impact the programs in a way. And so this is sort of our year of, we're still sort of in that first year of collecting data appropriately. There's still some challenges that we have in that capacity, but we're working through them because it is such an important goal, as you know, Anna, of making sure that you are looking at every program from that lens.
Now, there was a question that just popped up on the screen as we're on this topic of inclusion and diversity and equity being the watchword for gender representation, but diversity and inclusion. Are women still included in that diversity definition in your organizations? How do women factor into the diversity definition? Aisha, will you want to tackle that first?
Sure. We don't have a diversity stream specifically. So I know that Telefilm has had a 5-year goal for gender parity in terms of having 50% of all of its creators be women. And so that is still an ongoing goal that we're working toward, that is tracked and that we try to publish results for every year. And that is very much feeds into our decision-making process. That is independent of the sort of work that we're doing in terms of equity and inclusion for Black, Indigenous, people of color, LGBTQ, and people living with disabilities. And so those are the groups that we are also adding a different lens on since 2020, of making sure that we are also addressing their unique needs. So of course, to ensure that there is gender parity in the industry, there is women in sort of all key roles in the projects that we're supporting, that yes, that is still remains a great goal for Telefilm. Gender parity is still there. Alongside that, we've created this other goal of making sure that people from other communities, people who actually are impacted in intersectional ways across those as well, have a place have sort of their unique needs understood as well and tracked, and their data collected so that we can also address their challenges.
Yeah, and before I jump over to Anna, I just want to add in that we are awake to the notion that we're not living in a binary world in terms of gender, that there is gender fluidity and different identities around gender, and not just orientation, but around gender identity. So it's really heartening to hear that our institutions, which are I don't want to use the word glacial, but in the past,
Feel free to use it. Feel free to use it.
in the past, change has been a very slow process. And so it's nice to hear that there's an opening or a welcoming, or at least a desire to create that space that recognizes the diversity in terms of identity, the intersectionality of identity. And how we track that is an ever evolving process. I see that. Anna, how about you within Ontario Creates? Do women factor into that diversity definition or that stream, or how do they?
Absolutely, they do. I actually have our website open here for this reason. So what we use is the provincial definition of diversity, and it includes but isn't limited to ancestry, culture, ethnicity, gender identity, gender expression, language, physical and intellectual abilities, sexual orientation. So we've had that in our guidelines for a number of years now. But what we've also added to it is the fact that we want to strengthen our relationships with Indigenous communities, connect with people and communities by sharing and celebrating their diverse heritage and cultures. So these are things that we do look at. Obviously, it's all part of the diversity stream. Every once in a while we get an application where it's all women on the team, and I'd have to say it's very, it's not, it's, the thing about Ontario Creates is we really have a lot of women there that are actually in positions of power. And, just within industry initiatives, I'd have to say that we're always excited whenever we do see projects from female producers and female writer directors. I think that's always the big thing, because female producers have been around for a very, very long time, and I think they were probably one of the first ones to really come out and start making a difference and start changing the numbers. But then you look at female directors, and there weren't enough. They still weren't enough. They weren't. So I think it's just something where you start with the female producers, and then they're going to bring all the other females along in key positions. So yes, definitely, it fits within the diversity stream.
We have a question here about the data. So what would you say is the percentage of women that are involved in the funding sector, telefilms specifically, since, as we know, decision-making from these institutions influences what's made? And so could you just referenced it, Anna, of all the women in decision-making positions at Ontario Creates. Aisha, could you tell us what the configuration is of telefilm across the country?
Sure. It is a lot of women as well, which is great. There are lots of women in lots of key decision-making roles. Within the project financing team, the team that I'm part of, all the regional feature film executives at this time are also women. So you have Lori, who is in the Halifax office. You have Lauren in the Western office, Melissa Amer, who is in Ontario, and Marie-France Gaubeau, who is in Quebec. And so those are all wonderful women. I'm really excited to be working with this great group. There is a lot of work to be done in terms of diversity elsewhere. So in terms of ensuring that we have staff that are from all other kinds of communities as well. That is where I think that telefilm is looking to do its most work internally. I don't work on the internal sort of side of equity and diversity and inclusion. I work on the more public facing side. So I don't have exact sort of figures on what the staff makeup looks like, but I know that there is work to be done in terms of ensuring communities, racialized communities, as well as LGBTQ folks, people with disabilities are well represented within the staff here.
Yes, that's wonderful to hear. And I'm seeing a lot of cheers and kudos from the audience popping up in the chat in the stream here. So that's really welcome news to know that there's so much inclusion, gender inclusion in the decision-making landscape in your institutions. It's really important. So just to create a visual picture verbally here of Telefilm, you have offices in the Atlantic region that cover the Atlantic provinces, correct? Could you just take us through? That's Laurie McCurdy. And is it Peggy Lanus in Quebec, or?
Yeah, so Peggy would be our English, so like exactly how you mentioned it. Laurie McCurdy is our regional feature film executive for the Atlantic provinces. And so all of them sort of are grouped into one, that one person there. So she does a great job of ensuring that she takes care of the Atlantic side. Peggy Lanus is our regional feature film executive for Quebec for English market. And Marie-France Bouveau would be the national feature film executive for French market in Quebec. Within Ontario, it's Melissa Amer, who's the interim feature film executive here. And in the West, it's Lauren Davis. And so when you're applying for funding to Telefilm, let's say you're applying through the main production stream and you're in the below $2.5 million threshold, then how your project is basically referred to internally as regional. So you're coming in through sort of the regional office. So where you're applying to is sort of how your application will be grouped. So whether you're applying through an office that's in Halifax, for example, you will be coming through Laurie's office, for example, and that will be your contact person and anyone, the person that you want to speak to regarding your project or before you submit, that's the right person to go to. And then about the above 2.5 million, that's the National Feature Film Executive. So that used to be Stephanie Azam, who's since left this year. So we are still looking to fill that role, and Lauren Davis is stepping into that role until in time that we find somebody to fill Stephanie's big shoes.
Now, in our pre-chat, Aisha, we talked about the process of you apply through the e-dialogue, and if your project is selected, then what happens? What is the next step? Like, oh, we're going to work with Telefilm. What could we expect next?
Yeah, so I am part of the project financing team, which is sort of the decision-making team ahead of whether your project is selected or not. So we're helping sort of shape what goes into the guidelines. We're helping ensure, we're the ones speaking to clients who are prospects who are looking to apply. So we're helping with that information. And then once the decisions are made, then your project gets assigned to an investment analyst who works with you to make sure that you're meeting sort of the drawdown conditions, that sort of all the pieces that are required in terms of Telefilm's requirements for the continued eligibility of the project are met. And so they will work with you to make sure that you're, meeting the requirements in terms of dates, that you are submitting the right pieces at the right time, that they're the person that you would contact. So that person is in our business affairs team. And so you basically get handed over from project financing to business affairs, and then your relationship becomes really a one-to-one with the investment analyst who's working with you through the genesis of your file. And then as we know, sometimes projects will go through a year, sometimes they'll go through 2 years. It really depends on the project and how long that will actually take. But again, with the decision letter and once your contract is signed, that's sort of where you have the template of what the next steps will be.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's great to know. And so, Anna, with Ontario Creates, what's the process? I should just take a step back. Aisha, for Telefilm, you can be the first in. Telefilm can be the first funder, if you will, in the financing structure. Is that correct? Or how do you, I know it's in the grid, it's talked about in the grid, but could you just sort of give us the quick thumbnail when we can come into Telefilm?
Yeah, there's no requirement for, in terms of like having committed sort of funding. We understand that that's not always the case when you're applying. You don't always have, you may have letter of intent. So we'll see a lot of letter of intents attached to financing when people are applying. And so as those firm up, that's when you're supposed to provide them. So once you get a decision, that's when you're supposed to be able to provide the full sort of contract and be able to bring those pieces together and adjust any changes that you may have in your financing.
Yeah, to close the
point.
financing. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly.
Okay, great. And certainly the requirements is slightly different at the national level, at the more commercial level, where you have to have more industry buy-in.
Yes. So yeah, one of the changes that we made this year, as I mentioned, was the distributor trigger that we had for national level projects. So any project above, it used to be 2.5 million, you would have to have a distributor attached. For this year, we've changed that requirement to 3.5 million. And as I mentioned, the reason for that being is so that applicants are not entering into unfavorable relationships with distributors that may not be suitable for their projects. And so that begins at the 3.5 million and up level. So when you're applying for at that scale, that's when we need to see that there is, you have a distributor attached, that there is industry buy-in, and that you have a plan for this project at this scale.
Yeah. And so now we segue over to Ontario Creates, because you're not the first in.
We're the last. We are the last in. We have been since the beginning, and we will continue to be the last in. It gets a little tricky when you're sometimes waiting for, when applicants have applications pending at NOHFC or at Telefilm Canada, and it becomes a little bit of a waiting game. And this is only for, we're talking about those that pass at the jury stage. And in order for us to say yes to you, you must be fully financed. And so all the commitments have to be in place. Otherwise, we can't say yes to you. We cannot go to contract. And I think that is where, we will have to say no to some projects that we really do are interested in, that it meets everything else except for the financing. And I'd have to say that when projects do come in, in terms of the financing, if we see that Telefilm is involved, it does elevate the project for us. It makes the project stronger against a project that is also fully funded, but funded by individuals. We're talking concrete money that's coming from Telefilm, or that's coming from NOHFC. So those are the kinds of funding scenarios that will make your project stronger. Because, and I have to reiterate, we are the last in, and so it's something where, people do have to get everything else in order. And it's not that you have to have all the yeses before you can apply to us. You're actually allowed to apply to us when you have 70% of your budget financed. And we have this little formula where we say, okay, if you have your application pending at Telefilm, we can take that out of the equation. We can take your application that's pending with us out of the equation, and we're left with a base budget. And of that base budget, 70% of it has to be committed. Otherwise, you can't apply to us. You're not going to go to jury if you don't at least meet that threshold. And then we're hoping that, because it takes a number of months for the whole process to go through, that by the time we do go to jury, it's a matter of, do you now have that confirmed in order for the jury to be able to say yes?
Mm-hmm. I want to go to sort of a two-tiered kind of question, and we talked about this in our pre-chat about deadlines and when to come to talk with you. And Anna, you've talked about it so far in terms of the 70% and that sort of thing. But when should I, if I'm a Ontario-based producer, when should I come and speak with you about my project, at what stage, and then let's segue into deadlines. And because you talked about waiting on pending applications and that sort of thing, because our deadlines in our industry don't always quite line up. So when should I come and talk to you if I'm an Ontario-based producer and I have a feature film, animation, documentary, live action, and I am preparing my proposal? When?
So I'm the lead on the Film Fund production. But if your genre, if it's drama or animation, you will be speaking to me. If it is documentary, you'll be speaking to my colleague Karam Masri, and you can find her information on our website. So she would be taking in your calls. She does the documentary side. And basically, you should be coming to talk to us before you're going to apply to us. We have 3 deadline cycles a year, March, July, and November. So it would be great for you to come and talk to us beforehand, ask us whatever questions you want, but please read the guidelines first and ask us specific questions about that. It is great to be able to have that conversation beforehand, especially if there are certain things where there are pre-approvals that are required. And if you fall into that category, you should be aware of that, and you need to speak to us beforehand. We do, when we go through the files, we do say, well, did this person come and talk to us before applying? Because they had to have a pre-approval, and if you didn't, then you can't go through. And the one pre-approval that I'm thinking of, which is a big part of it, is we have 2 requirements. One is we have a set of requirements for the production company, and then we have another set of requirements for the producer, for the Ontario producer, which is that they must have had a film that was theatrically released in Canada, or they produced a documentary series or a drama series, or I think 2 one-hour documentary films that were broadcast in Canada. There are a number of things. If you don't meet that requirement, and there are some that are emerging, they don't meet that requirement, we still allow them to come in and apply as the producer of the production, provided that they bring on an executive producer who does meet that requirement. And in order for someone who doesn't qualify, in order for them to apply, they have to have this conversation with us beforehand to be able to say, this is my executive producer, can I come in with this person? Am I able to apply? And then we'll say yes or no, depending on the situation. So it really should be happening beforehand. With both Karam and I. And then, we also have the development fund as well, and that is a continuous fund. We just opened now. I think we finally launched it for this coming year, and we have a deadline. It goes until the end of November. This is new. Last year we had it until the end of January. So if you're thinking about coming in for us for development, just be aware. And it's the same thing with development as well. If you do not qualify as the producer, if you don't meet the producer requirement and you want to bring on an EP, you have to have that conversation with us before applying as well. And this doesn't mean that absolutely everyone has to come to us and have a conversation before they apply, because there are some producers who simply they qualify. They have no reason. They're not looking for any kind of pre-approval of any kind, and they just qualify, and they know the guidelines. They've applied before, and they will simply apply to us, and that is fine as well.
Great. So basically, first-time applicants should have that preliminary conversation to make sure they're pre-approved, and if they're not quite at the meeting the criteria, that they have other things that mitigate that for you in terms of the assessment.
Yes, yeah, and I mean, and you have to. what we're looking for in terms of this executive producers, this is someone who will be committed to the project. We're not looking for someone who's just going to say, yes, attach my name to it and then not really be involved in the project. We want to make sure if we're going to take a chance on someone who is more up and coming, who is emerging, that there is someone there that they can fall back on, someone who will help guide them. If something goes wrong, they will be able to step in and help them out. We only win if we get to the finish line with the film, So we want to get there. We don't want anything to happen to prevent a film from getting to that place, So we're all on the same team.
Mm-hmm. I do have a question, and I want to get over to Aisha to talk about when to come in to talk to Telefilm and deadlines and that sort of thing as well. But one of the criteria you talked about, Anna, is theatrical release, that you've had a film have a theatrical release, and this year in 2020 and now, theatrical releases are somewhat of a mystery question mark. We're going to talk a little bit more about theatrical and distribution later on today during the content analysis panel with Robin Smith from Kino Smith. But what is Ontario Creates contemplating in terms of that particular criteria as we move forward and the landscape is so different?
Well, I don't see the criteria changing because that's just one of. So it's you will have to have had a film that was theatrically released in Canada, or you produced a documentary or drama series that was broadcast in Canada, or so it's just one of. So we do kind of open it up, so it's not directly linked to that you have to have had a theatrical release. The other thing, and we actually changed it about 2 years ago, to come in for the film fund, it had to have received a theatrical release. Mm-hmm. We eliminated that 2 years ago. And what's happened now is some of the films that have managed to finish because they shot before COVID, they unfortunately were part of the older guidelines that we had, the older requirements that we had, and so it's actually written in their contract that they have to have a theatrical release for that film, and they have we're very, very flexible. They have come back to us and said we can't do it, and we just say okay. It's just honestly, it's an internal process. We get the paper going to give them an exemption to the contract. That way it's just papered and we say you've met you've met that contract obligation. And a lot of them are having VODs, and so it's fine. It's just those that are now coming in under the old rules that are being caught by this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a big one. It's a big worry, and nobody wants to be in breach of their contract ever. Mm-hmm. So it's good to know that Ontario Creates is aware and being flexible, particularly after the year that we've had just passed in terms of.
Yeah, and that is one of the things that has been different over the past year for us, is that we've been very accommodating to try and help people recover. Mm-hmm. From this, and not only are we being very flexible with things, and we're extending the deadlines. They keep getting extended. In addition to that, we've also had these fast track payments go out to our clients prior to them actually delivering the paperwork that they were supposed to deliver to us, just to try and get the money out to them as quickly as possible so that they can get in onto the next phase of the film. And again, it's always about being flexible, about being accommodating, because we haven't seen these times before. We won't ever see them again in our lifetime. Well, the last one was 100 years ago, so not bad.
Yes.
So yeah, we are being very, very open, very flexible, we would never be this this open if it wasn't for all of this. But then again, we wouldn't have this many films that have run into trouble the way we have this year. And you know what? I'm really happy to say that quite a few of our 2020 films have gone to camera. So
yes, it's miraculous to see how our industry has adapted and continue to move forward and to tell stories in this particular scenario. Aisha, could we talk with you about when to come into telefilm, deadlines? And I know that we just had a deadline yesterday.
Yes.
For the production fund. So could we talk about telefilm, how to interact with telefilm, when and deadlines?
Sure. I think what we always say is when you feel ready to discuss your project is the best time to reach out to a feature film executive and talk to them about what would be sort of the right window for you, especially if you're an emerging producer and have not had that sort of understanding of experience with telefilm previously. I think it makes sense to start that conversation when you feel like you're in a comfortable place with your project, when you have your team established. When you apply to telefilm, it's the applicant company that applies. It's not an individual. So you want to make sure that for eligibility purposes that there are a few factors that are required when you're applying to telefilm. It's Canadian production companies that can apply. They have to be based in Canada, so they have to have a head office here, and they're need to be operating as an audiovisual production company as well. And so all of those factors have to be sort of in place. So getting yourself ready to be an applicant is a step for some folks. So getting that part ready first is a good note. And this is because the reason we say Canadian citizens and have that eligibility requirement there is because we're a federal crown corporation and we take our sort of rules from the Investment Canada Act. So that's where that eligibility comes in. So I think at the time that you have a company established, you have a project that you're excited about and that you think and you have a team that's ready, that of a creative team that's ready, that can speak to sort of the requirements of this project, of getting this done. I think that's a good time to reach out to a regional feature film executive if you anticipate your project being below 2.5 million and you're looking to apply for production. That's a good person to talk to there. For a talent to watch, that would be our sort of talent development program that I was discussing earlier. And so that has a lower requirement for minimum budgets. I believe it's $250K. Don't quote me on that. I think that's right. And so in that case, I know I'm scared what I'm going to say and someone's going to ask me later, but no, I believe it's $250K. And I know that in that, when you're applying to Talent to Watch, you have the opportunity to incorporate later on in the process. So that is something that happens after the selections happen. You may have the opportunity to do that. And so that might be the right avenue for some folks that may have not had that experience with telephone before, but for the general production program, you would apply as an applicant company. When you're ready to talk about your project and positioning it, I think that's a good time to talk to the feature film executive who can describe the models to you in terms of projects that they had last year. For example, in Ontario, there was about 56 applications and 6 were funded. So that gives you a sense of the competitiveness at that level. There's always a high demand, no matter what we do with our guidelines or what changes we make. Especially, I don't even want to say, even before we've tried to open up and be more transparent about and have actual outreach with clients, even prior to that, we still have a high demand. So I don't want to, place any sort of this is due to a change that we're doing. This has always been the case. It's a very competitive environment. And so when you're ready to apply or when you're ready to discuss your project and have it be ready to sort of compete at that level, I think that's a good point to start. And that's difficult to say. It's different for each project. It's different if you're working on a documentary. It's different if you're working on narrative. So I think that is a decision that a producer makes.
Yeah. Fantastic. Now we're just an hour in, and we have 25 minutes left in our conversation, and I'm going to officially call for questions from our audience. If we have more to field, I'm happy to facilitate those. As we're waiting for those questions to come in, though. I wonder if we could turn our attention to international co-production, interprovincial co-production, and how Telefilm and Ontario Creates interfaces with filmmakers from outside Canadian and Ontario jurisdictions. So perhaps Aisha, could you talk a little bit about Telefilm's interaction with you just spoke about Canadian producers, but you do accept international co-productions. How does that work?
Yes. So we I'm sorry, someone is calling me. I'm just going to cancel it. Sorry about that. That's a classic Zoom fun that we're having working from home. I forgot what I was answering. Oh, yes. So what we refer to them as is, we call them official treaty audiovisual co-productions. So that is what you would be applying to Telefilm as. And so that means you're basically applying within that sort of, you're applying to have a co-production with a country that is comprises part of our list that we have a treaty with. So that's the first sort of criteria there. Just because you have, you may have a film that's shot in different places or has that sort of a producer maybe or someone attached from a different country, that doesn't automatically make it a co-production. So an official treaty co-production is something that we support, and we could be a majority partner or a minority partner within that. So that's an opportunity there. The funding from that, it comes from the same pot of money that the production stream comes from, and you're able to apply for that through the year. So the deadline doesn't necessarily apply in this case, but we do ask people if they are ready to apply with the deadline. And so that's sort of my note there is looking at the official treaty co-production requirements. We have a separate team that addresses those. And so we try to make sure that we are discussing with them and communicating with them to make sure that we understand the projects and we understand the applications coming in. Mm-hmm. Did I answer your question? I'm sorry, that call threw me off a little bit.
Yes, you're absolutely answering the question. I want to apply something that we already discussed, is that, you know, come in sooner rather than later, so that because international co-productions are much more complex in terms of the business affairs side of them. So to be sure that you come in for the conversations early on, so that you can put your criteria in place for both and your foreign producing partner.
Yeah, you want to make sure you're having that conversation first, so the executive that you're speaking to or you're having that conversation with is aware that this is a project that's coming down the pipeline. They have a sense of when, they have a sense of what because as you mentioned, there are so many moving pieces with co-productions. There is a lot of parties involved, and they have sort of their own criteria and their own deadlines. So we want to be aware of that. And I think that starts with a conversation with the executive that you're looking to speak to based on your budget level for the project.
And Aisha, can you speak to the notion of collaborating with a producer from another province? So say somebody, this will segue us into your answer too, Anna. A producer from Ontario is collaborating with a producer in British Columbia. Part of the project is going to be shot in Ontario, part is going to be completed. Let's say the post is going to be completed in BC or something. Mm-hmm. How does that work with Telefilm, and who applies? Is there a lead applicant, or what? How does that configure?
Yeah, we see a lot of intra-provincial co-productions, as we call them. That's not necessarily what we refer to as the audiovisual treaty co-production, so that's sort of separate. So everything that applies in the production stream would apply for an intra-provincial co-production. What we're just, in terms of organizing the application process and that conversation that you have, we just look at the production company, the applicant company, and see where the majority ownership is. And if that leans one way within the province, within one particular province, we just ask that you come and have the conversation with that feature film executive, because your application will be shepherded by them through the process.
Yeah, so if I have a relationship with Lauren Davis and my co-producer has a relationship with Melissa Amer in Ontario, would we both have conversations and then decide?
Yeah, I think we generally leave that to the applicant to decide. However, we do say it has to do with the ownership of the company itself. So if your ownership is based in a particular province, then we recommend that you go through that route.
It's great answer. And Anna, how about Ontario Creates in interprovincial co-productions and
International.
International, yes.
The thing we can't do right now because we can't travel. Regardless of whether it's international or interprovincial, we really don't have anything to do with the co-producing partner. Our applicant is the Ontario-based producer, and we even go a bit further with Telefilm. You know, the production company that is applying to us, not only do they need to be Canadian controlled and owned, but they also have to have a permanent establishment in Ontario. And then we have the producer requirement, and that person has to be not only Canadian citizen but also an Ontario resident. You know, so we go that little step further, and that is our applicant. That is our client if we say yes to them. And so they're the only ones that we're going to be dealing with. I won't be dealing with the outside producers unless, you know, like we can have a Zoom meeting with the Ontario producer, and then the co-producing partner is part of that conversation. That is fine, but I would never be having a separate conversation with the co-producer from another country or another province, because even though they are the producer of the project, they are not my applicant. They are not privy to anything that I have with my, you know, between myself and the applicant. It's up to them to share everything, obviously. But yeah, I mean, you know, that is the relationship. The relationship is with the Ontario producer, and only so I can't have a conversation with a producer from another country unless it's to say, hey, who are the great producers in Ontario? You know, you know. But other than that, I mean, we really can't do that. And we actually, there is an event that we have. Again, it's on our website. It's called If at TIFF, and this is something for Ontario producers. Obviously, not just Ontario producers, but it is like a speed dating event with Canadian and international producers to try and have them come together and find a project that they can work on. And even if there's not a project that they have available at that time, at least they will have made, you know, they will have met another partner, someone that they could potentially work with in the future. So for anyone who is watching this on the international side, I suggest that they take a look at If at TIFF to apply for that, because that would be a way to get to an Ontario-based producer and get to meet them and work with them, because we really have a lot to offer.
That is really great. It's a wonderful tip, Anna. And I wonder if you can tell us, is it the International Feature Film Finance Forum? How many F's are in that if?
It's probably on our website, which I'd have to. It's IFF, so International Film Forum,
Yes.
Finance. I don't know.
International Film Finance.
We just call it If at TIFF because it just flows.
It does, yes. Yeah, that's fantastic. I have a question here, and it's very general, but it is significant. Do you, both of you, this is a question for both of you, what tips do you have for successful applications, or conversely, what would you suggest we completely avoid? Like, never do that. So tips for successful applications. Let's make it proactive. And Aisha, do you want to start?
Okay, I'll go first.
Yeah.
I think so. This is, as I mentioned, I joined the team in November, so this will sort of be my first go around. So I think if we do this panel again next year, I'll have more to say. But I mostly what we describe in terms of applications that the feedback that I've heard from my other team members and what I've seen so far is that they're looking for a complete application. So really making sure your project is there at the level of you requesting, a $500,000 for your project, making sure that you're there, that members of the creative team and members of the team in general really complement each other in ways that, if someone has more experience with in this capacity, maybe the person in this capacity has sort of that other type of experience. I think just having well-rounded teams is helpful because, as you'll see with the evaluation grid that we shared for our programs, specifically for production, you'll see at the lower budget threshold at below 2.5 million, creative elements are 50% of your total score, which is a huge. I mean, that's the majority of your scoring, and so. The reason I'm mentioning that is that the evaluation grade is a great place to kind of look at and really ascertain of whether your project is at the place that you want it to be, and it's at the level that you want it to be at. So you're ready to have a conversation about it. You're ready to answer questions about it. You're ready to, the type of film you're making. Your director's vision and intentions, that's a document that you submit. That's part of your creative materials. It is clearly identifies how the words in the script are going to translate onto the screen. So really making sure those pieces are well realized. We have something called a community engagement plan. That's a tool that's part of the application process. That's not new. It was part of the process last year as well. It's more emphasized this year. I think we're getting a lot more questions about it this year due to some of the changes that we've made. And so this is a tool that we've sort of included as part of the application materials to allow filmmakers a space to talk about their relationship to the subject matter that they're bringing to the screen. So in the case of narrative film, if you're focusing on underrepresented communities in some kind of capacity or a specific subculture or a specific community, this is the place where you would talk about, why this filmmaking team and why this story. It's a great place to connect the filmmakers to the project and to say, this is our relationship with it, or this is the research we've done, or if that's the case, these are the consultations that we've done, or we've made sure to have XYZ people on our crew, and that's part of the process, or we've had this model that we did on another production that we've applied here as well. And so those are going to differ between projects. They're going to differ between producers. So that's sort of kind of a flexible tool for you to be able to contextualize your project and yourself within that, and to say to a committee that may not know who you are, and that has a feature film executive that you're familiar with, that you've spoken to, that you may have a relationship with, but a committee that may not. How do you get them to get to know you, and how do you sell yourself to them to say, I'm the best person for this project. I'm the best person because here's my experience, or here's what we're doing, or here's what's different in this sort of thing, or I made sure to attach a director that's very strong in this area because I'm not and not advanced in that sort of capacity. Really making sure that you're just imagining that you're an advisory committee member who's kind of evaluating the project, and what would you want them to know, and what would you want them to understand about you and your project and what you're bringing to the table that they may not, because a script is sort of a creative tool, but it doesn't necessarily say why this project is important, or why this should be made, or the why of why you're the best person to do it. I think that's the community engagement plan is a great tool to sort of say, hey, this is the impact of our production, and this is how we're going to manage it, and this is how we're going to talk about it, or this is how we're addressing it in sort of different ways.
Fantastic.
So I think that's a really a tool that we've been emphasizing in our discussions, so that people know how to use it and are able to sort of connect themselves to the work.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Anna, how about you? Any tips for successful applications to Ontario Creates?
Just going to go back to IF at TIFF. It is called the International Financing Forum, and it is under business initiatives on our website for people to take a look. Took me 2 minutes to find it, so I should have known where it was. But anyway, in terms of the applications, the thing is, just to reiterate, we have the same issue that telephone experiences, which is we are oversubscribed. Regardless of which stream you come in, whether it is the diverse stream or not, we are oversubscribed. We will say yes to anywhere, I think, from 25% to maybe, if it's a good cycle, 31%. Like it's really that low. So the majority of people are hearing the negative response.
Yeah.
You really have to make your application as strong as you possibly can, because it's only as good as what you're up against. And we don't know what's coming in. We don't know what's coming in through the pipeline. Just because you are a producer who meets the producer requirement because you had a film theatrically released 10 years ago, it doesn't put you in that strong category. So you really should know, you should be aware of how competitive are you going to be as a producer, or your team, because we look at the track record of the team. How is it going to be for the project? What about the financing? How strong is the financing? As I mentioned before, if you have two projects that are equal in every way, but one of them has telefilm and NOHFC attached, and the other one has private investors attached, we're going to lean more towards the telefilm one, because we know that is real money. There are a number of things in our application that we ask for. Make sure that you submit everything that we ask for.
Yes.
There are other things where we say you must use our template. Make sure you use our template. There is one document that we call the schmo, even though it doesn't really quite make sense. But anyway, that's what we call it. It is the schedule of minimum commitment of Ontario expenditures. This one document is so important because that one document is going to either represent 40% of your evaluation or 25% of your evaluation. Sometimes people don't submit it. And so they don't, and before it goes to jury, we have this eligibility and completeness review that every file has to go through to determine whether they are eligible and whether they are complete to go to jury. If you're not, we will just kick you out, because we have so many already there to go to jury that we're going to say no to. So we're just not going to bother if you didn't submit that schmo, which is a vital part of the application. If you didn't submit chain of title documentation, how do I know that you own the IP to this project? There are so many things that you really have to make sure that it is complete, that there are no questions. You can't tell us you're going to be shooting 5 months from now, and then we have a writer's agreement that says, no, the script hasn't been delivered yet, or, everything has to line up. You don't want us to have any questions as to what's going on with this production. There are a lot of things where you're getting conflicting information, and that's not very good either. And yeah, it's just, you have the one shot. Once you hit submit, you're not allowed to send us any more documents. You can't talk to us about your file in that process. So we're not willing to look at anything else except for whatever you've submitted. So if you made a mistake, that's what goes to jury. Or not go to jury. So we are pretty strict when it comes to that, and then you'd have to wait until the next deadline. But what we also have, and I think this is very important, because unfortunately so many get the no response from us, we do offer feedback to our clients. If they are a no, then they can come and talk to us before they apply again, so that they can know where the project was lacking, what the, what was brought up, what was discussed, what the issues were, to try and make their application stronger the next time around. So we are there for that, and we do highly recommend that people say yes to this feedback that we offer. A lot don't, surprisingly. A lot don't.
Wow.
I wanted to, sorry, if I can add to Anna's great points, the completeness is really, really important. We have something called the list of required documents that's available for each sort of program that you apply to. So I really encourage people to print that and make sure, just at the doing the administrative process of submitting or just actually going through the checklist part of it, it's crucial. In much the same way as the Ontario Creates. I was going to use the old title, sorry.
OMDC.
Yes, I was. It was on my lips. I almost said it. When you're submitting making sure that you're submitting all the required documents. This year, what we've adjusted, as in years before, you were able to sort of adjust your application or send things in after. If they're further down the pipeline, we were more flexible with receiving that. Now with this model of going to committees, we've gotten rid of that, and we've made sure to communicate that to our clients and potential clients and applicants that if you are submitting a project, it is sort of like that's it. Once it's in, it's in. That's the cutoff. You will once the coordinator is sort of going through your file and finds that there's things missing, they will contact you and they will open up Dialogue, which is our online system, and ask you to submit these remaining documents. If they're not submitted, it could mean that your project is ineligible to go to the committee. And if they are submitted, if they're not sort of an eligibility type document and we don't receive them, then your package will go as is to the committee. So it might be missing some information. And so there's a really important step of making sure all your stuff is there. So making sure that the person who's sort of the administrative person attached to your file, the person responsible for making sure those are, and make sure that person is good, that they have all the right documents that they need. They have a sense of when that Telefilm will be reaching out to them to provide more information, that they're responsive and available to do that. We also have budgets on our website as well. We have a budget template as well as filmography templates. If folks would like to use the budget template, we do ask that you use that. And filmography templates are also available for providing sort of the track record piece for the writer, director, producer, the creative team that we asked for. And I wanted to mention that because Telefilm does have these two-strike rule, so you can only apply with the same project twice. So that's why it's really important to really have a conversation with yourself and your team to see if this is the right time to apply. If you do get a no, you can come back one more time with that same project in the same program. And if you get a no again, unfortunately, it's not eligible to come back again. So really making sure that you're using those two strikes and making sure that you're submitting the most sort of complete project that you can when you do.
Yeah. And just to reiterate that with Ontario Creates, no one is going to contact you asking you for missing information. You're just going to be booted out. You're not going to get to jury if we're missing documents and we determine that you're incomplete. So that is the one thing, though, to keep in mind. What happens is if you do go to jury, if you are deemed complete and eligible and you do go to jury, 1 week before the jury meets, we ask you for a one-page updated letter, but that's just for something meaningful. Like it could be at the time you applied, your application was pending with Telefilm, and now you got the Telefilm money. It's something that is really going to, push the needle in your direction. So we're very, very strict about that. And just I pulled up just to show you how competitive it is. So what I pulled up was our 2020 numbers. So we had 104 applications, and this is across drama, animation, and documentary. So 104 applications 2020, we funded 30 of them. So that's a success rate of 29%.
Wow. Yes, and it's a different rate across the country in each of the regions, isn't it, Aisha?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I don't have that information on hand, but I know that it's also just as dismal, I would say. It's competitive. We always have more demand than we can meet. So I need people to really make sure their projects are competitive and that they're competitive and complete when they're applying, because there could be, with all things being equal, you really want to make sure that your project is the one that stands out for, whichever way that you can make that happen. Perhaps you're boosting the track record, perhaps you're boosting the your marketing plan, your audience reach and marketing potential plan that you provide. Perhaps that's about making sure you have another sensitivity read done on your script beforehand. So there's a lot of factors there to make sure that you're submitting the most competitive application that's likely to get a yes.
Yeah. Wow, I could speak with you a lot more about all of these things, and I know Leslie Ann has just joined us, so we're going to have to wrap up. We're actually a minute over our allotted 90 minutes with you. I do have a comment or a question about that submission criteria, and it's really interesting to hear that both Telefilm and Ontario Creates have that. Once you press submit, that's it, no more. And no more chances. I do have some feedback on that, because it's an anxiety-producing experience to press submit. And so I would hope in the consultations we can talk more about making a more humane submission process.
We used to, we used to do that up until a couple of years ago, and we just don't have the staff to chase after people. That's the bottom line. And it's the business side of producing.
Yeah,
it is what it is.
What I'm suggesting is a space where you can build a portfolio and you can see what you've got on the platform, because the platform isn't always as user-friendly on the outside as it may appear perhaps on the inside. That's just some feedback from filmmakers on the outside. But that's a whole other consultative question. This has been such an enjoyable, thorough, in-depth conversation with you, Anna, and you, Aisha. I just am so grateful. And Leslie Ann, thank you for inviting me to moderate. It's been a delight. And I thank you both for all the insights that you've shared and the great tips, the absolute stellar tips that you've provided with for the filmmakers here. Over to you, Leslie Ann, to say goodbye and to wrap us up. Thank you. Thank you. You're on mute.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, thank you so much, Carol, for moderating this illustrious panel with these phenomenal women. I noticed we still have a few bugs to work out with some of the logos. I noticed that it scooches. So it's right now, Anna, you are WIDC.
Yes.
I'm Ontario Creates. I should disappear. Pay no attention to that. I want to thank all of you. Anna, Aisha, thank you so much. Carol, always very grateful for your contribution and partnership. We do have a panel at 4 p.m. It is content in review with Robin Smith of Keno Smith. So it's going to be a nice, intimate panel to discuss traditional distribution models and hybrid distribution models. And for our viewers, tomorrow at 7 p.m., we are having a short filmmaker panel. Not that the filmmakers are short, but short film content. We have so many films in our North American short film program, our international short program at TIFF this weekend. And to our illustrious guests, do watch for your promo code. So hopefully you can indulge in some films this weekend. And I look forward to seeing you all again. Carol, I will see you in half an hour or less.
Thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
See you soon.
Thank you.